Well, welcome back to TuckerAllen Live. I'm Scott Trout. As always, I'm hosting the Friday edition of our TuckerAllen Live here on social media on Facebook. And today we're joined by the TuckerAllen Senior Paralegal, Kathy McWard. Welcome, Kathy.
Welcome. Thank you.
Well, glad to have you. We're going to talk about something I know we spoke about at our virtual town hall yesterday, and we've done it a lot over the last few months in talking about wills and trusts, but something that's so important, and I know, and I've always said from my experience, and it makes everyone cringe, and that is funding your trust. And so, Kathy, let's talk about funding. That's always a common question for many that have a will, have a trust, or maybe haven't done it, but they've heard it. Maybe let's start just what is funding your trust?
Well, it's a great question. Basically, how you fund your trust is you would want those assets to touch your trust in one or two ways. And you could either do that by having the asset be owned by the trust, or you can name the trust as the beneficiary of the asset. So the funding of the trust simply is just putting the assets, your assets, into your trust.
So it's the whole point of taking what you own and making sure it's protected within the vehicle that is chosen. Because a lot of people have questions about, I guess transfers on death and all those things, TODs, but naming them in the trust or naming them as a beneficiary, it's about pushing that. I think yesterday it was Missy Manning who said, hey, we have a basket. It's like filling your basket with the assets, right?
Absolutely. So creating the trust is like creating a basket, and that's something that we use to explain it to our TuckerAllen clients. And basically funding the trust is just taking those assets and putting them in your basket.
So why bother? I mean, what's the point of funding? It seems like an extra step, and people want to know, why should I actually fund my trust? What happens if we don't?
Well, the main reason why you want to fund your trust is to avoid probate. Mm-hmm. And probate is expensive. It's time consuming. It can take up generally up to a year, and it's very public. And most people that go to the whole process of creating their own trust are the main idea is that they want to avoid probate.
Yeah. And probate, obviously, that means more attorney's fees. That means the court system gets involved in following a statute that may direct how your things go rather than you choosing it. And it just added expense, added time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of the whole reason of going through this is to avoid it to the extent possible. An investment that's far smaller upfront, mostly, than hiring a lawyer for probate. That they're guided by the law that says how much I can get, which just seems crazy, and that's why it's so important. And I guess so then the question becomes, I've always said, I said this yesterday, I'm guilty of doing my estate plan and not fully funding, and I can smile about it right now, but certainly if I got sick and something terrible happened, my family would realize kind of, how little effort it probably took to do it. So then maybe tell everyone that's watching, what are the steps that you can do or take to fund your trust?
And it is kind of a daunting task, and a lot of people don't do the funding because of that. But if you break it down, and I can tell you how, we help out our TuckerAllen clients. We do have an add-on where, they can have us do the funding for them and have no worries. But basically, we start out by making a list of your assets. And then we categorize those assets into different areas. So you've got your bank accounts, for example. You have your retirement accounts, you have your investment accounts. So let's just kind of handle those. And then within each of those categories, you want to be able to have the company name and the contact information. You would like to have who the owner is and the account number or, policy number or whatever it would be. And then your decision of how you want it to touch or go into your basket of your trust.
I wasn't really avoiding it, but I'm pretty good at procrastinating. I needed a trust. When I found TuckerAllen, all our questions were answered, all of our fears allayed.
You want your wishes in place, so there's no guessing, no stress on the children.
Basically, they talk about what you need, what's important to you. It was more conversational, really very simple.
I mean, it's much like as you're kind of walking us through this list, I'm thinking it's kind of like I'm making a shopping list at my grocery store, putting it in a spreadsheet, saying, okay, here's what I need. And I think it's not as easy to say, okay, fund it. And then you got all these questions. I think that may be the first place for everyone to start is, okay, sit down, write down your assets, right? Put it together, that list, put together what it is, how it's titled, where it is, and then hire TuckerAllen for $600, right? To do it for you. Because I'm about ready to call because we talked off camera. I'm guilty. Guilty as charged. It's terrible. But I think that's the first part. It is daunting. And I think it is a little overwhelming, but not only that, some people may be watching thinking, no, it's no big deal. I can do this, but they may forget an asset. I mean, that's the one I think that where funding becomes so important, right? That you've got to make sure that everything that you have, everything possible needs to go into that basket, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And also anything you acquire in the future too. So the biggest part of funding is right when you're doing your trust and you've created it. So now you're trying to get all your assets into your trust, but you can't forget about it as you move on in life and acquire different assets. You want to make sure you get those also either touching your trust in some way.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin, yesterday we talked about kind of the 5 perhaps mistakes people may make when thinking about an estate plan. And one of them was life changes. And whether it's marriage, divorce, asset acquisition, over life. I mean, things, more kids, less kids, more grandkids, but more particularly, it's the selling and buying or acquiring of new assets. That's got to go into your estate, no matter when you created it. It could have been 5-10 years ago. You make a big acquisition of another, let's say a vacation home, right? That maybe want to go into be part of funding the trust. It just doesn't stop when you create it, right?
Right. And a big one that a lot of people forget about is cars.
Yeah.
So, making sure that when you buy a new car, that you're naming the trust as a beneficiary. They call it transfer on death. But, those are little things that people forget about. And then you've got this car, and cars are worth more nowadays. So it could be possibly a full probate estate if you missed your car.
Yeah. It's such a great point on that car. I was mentioning, a couple of weeks ago, my wife bought a new car, and the DMV, I've never heard them ask this. They said, do you have a trust? And if so, you're going to want to put it in your trust. They were actually, they don't have to do that. I mean, you would think at the DMV, if we've all experienced it, no matter where you are, it tends to be this kind of, cafeteria line. You come in, you do your thing, and you move out, and everybody just does it. But they were very kind enough to remind, and that's what got me on the whole funding part again was, oh my gosh, here it is. Now just front and center. Here's a great example, as you pointed out, your car. We go through cars. I mean, in America, gosh, some people are cycling through cars every couple of years, and they can be very expensive. If you pay cash or have a huge amount of equity, that could push you into over the small estate limit or whatever it is, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's huge. So, I mean, I think it's important to say that obviously funding what we're talking about doesn't mean you can't do it. I mean, everyone watching, doesn't mean you can't do it on your own. It is possible for you to do it on your own, right?
Absolutely. And I think the best way is what we talked about, making that list of your assets and kind of going through. It does take time. It takes a process of contacting those companies, getting the correct forms, filling the forms out, and then also following up after you've sent in those forms. A lot of times people think, well, I sent in the form and so I'm done. Well, you need to get a confirmation that the change was actually processed.
Mm-hmm.
at TuckerAllen, we actually give out trust cards with the estate plan. And so as we were talking about, you know, assets that you acquire later, you can just use that trust card. It's kind of like a wallet size card, and it's got the name of the trust on it.
Mhm.
So then you're able to, you know, use that and know how to actually title something into your trust or name the trust the beneficiary.
Yeah. I mean, there are, in fact, we've talked about TODs or, you know, those things. There are a number of ways that you can effectively do it, because that is a common question. Every time we have this or our virtual town hall, someone will say, well, instead of funding it and doing something different, can I utilize, you know, a TOD? Well, it's something obviously to make a call and make sure it's appropriate and it's going to accomplish what you want. I do think, and I think the attorneys that I've had on TuckerAllen on virtual town halls have all said, hey, it can be an effective strategy, but let's just make sure it's the right strategy for you. But funding is it. It's in your wheelhouse. That's kind of, I know what you're the resident expert in that. So Kathy, thanks for joining and letting everybody know kind of the most important thing. You've taken step one, perhaps getting a will, getting a trust. Now you got to fund it. So thanks for reminding everyone and causing a little bit more pain in my life to remind me. So anyway, thanks again
All
for
right,
joining.
happy to do it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
well, if you need help with TuckerAllen, you know, the employees over there and the people like Kathy are very willing and able to help fund your trust for you. I know they've mentioned $600. It's well worth the money to do it. So reach out to them. You can go to TuckerAllen.com, find out more information about them. You can actually schedule a consultation right then, right there by just hitting the button. You can do it via Zoom. You can do it just like this. You know, we're getting used to this in the pandemic and kind of figuring out how we can connect via video, or you can do it via phone. So you can check out more. Stay tuned on social media. We're doing this every Friday, same time, same place. We'll see you next Friday here on TuckerAllen Live on social media. Until then, have a great weekend.